Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'm going to speak to you about 25 minutes, and I'm going to try not to be too boring. I want to thank also the administration for inviting me here. The last time I was on this stage was in 1976. I was getting my diploma from Vernon T. Langford, who was your president back then. I remember we had Coach Fuller as my soccer coach, our soccer coach. Coach McConnell was the tennis coach. We had Carl Burke here, and I believe he still lives in town. We had Major Gillespie. I could go on and on about the teachers and people that influenced me greatly when I was here for 2 years. It's amazing that I can remember more names of more teachers in the 2 years that I was here at Hargrave than I can of my teachers in college. I went to University of Richmond. I think I maybe remember 1 or 2 names. More names than the people that I knew when I went to work on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Senate. There's just amazing, it's amazing how crystal clear those 2 years here at Hargrave stand out in my mind, and the people that taught me, and it's just amazing. When I was preparing this, the theme for this morning's presentation, a lot of these faces of these people that I knew here really kept coming into my head, and all I could hear them saying was, for God's sake, say something so intelligent, something worthwhile to these cadets. And so as I was struggling with the theme, I came up with the theme of American exceptionalism. And it's actually quite appropriate because all of these teachers that taught me and helped me grow up were truly exceptional people. And I don't say that I don't say that lightly, because there's not that many people in my life that I would consider exceptional. Certainly my parents and some of the mentors I've had in my adult life, but I would consider almost everybody I had here as a teacher to be truly exceptional. So you should be very proud of that. The concept of American exceptionalism, I think, is very appropriate because this is International Week. Think about what this concept means to you. What is it? I'm going to try to leave you with some general thoughts, and I want you to really think about it throughout this week. Read this quote to yourself. The exceptional thing about American exceptionalism, the conviction that the U.S. is unique in its role and purpose in the world, and is, yes, better than the rest, is the extent to which it has become an article of faith in American political life. Think about what that says. We live in a country that's very proud of its heritage. We've done great things. And we've done some not so great things. But it's got to the point in our culture that, how can I say this? That if we don't accept the prevailing idea that this United States is the greatest country in the world, you kind of start an argument. People don't like anybody to question U.S. greatness. But if you're talking about this overseas, and you try to say this, we're the greatest country in the world, you're going to get some pushback. You may not get a lot of pushback in this country, but overseas, internationally, you will. Think about that. Is the United States unique in its role and purpose in the world? How? Is the United States qualitatively better than any country in the world? Why? Think about that to yourself. This is a quote by President Obama. And I'm going to give you another quote after this, and you can decide which one you identify more with. They're not that different, but there is a difference. I believe in American exceptionalism, just as I suspect the Brits believe in British exceptionalism, and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism. I'm enormously proud of my country and its role and its history in the world. Sounds okay. This is a quote by Mitt Romney last year. I do not view America as just one more point on the strategic map, one more power to be balanced. I believe our country is the greatest force for good the world has ever known, and that our influence is needed as much now as ever. I will never, ever apologize for America. Think about that. Which of these two views do you feel a little more attached to, a little closer to, instinctually? One of the quotes is more relative, and the other one is a little more absolute. You can pretty much figure that out. Which view do you think most people around the world would identify with? I ask this question because it's International Week. And so, ideally, you should be thinking international. What do other people think of the United States? Is it more of a relative view, or is it more absolutist? Think about what you identify with. I'm going to tell you what I've observed personally over the past 10, 15 years that I've been involved in international activities, primarily in Latin America, and specifically in my native country of Honduras. I'm originally from Honduras. I was born there in 1958. I came to this country when I was 4 or 5 years old, and I stayed. But I still identify with my native country, even though I think like a North American. I've gone back every year for the past 15 years to do volunteer work. And what's good about this is that, besides helping, is that you get to meet people and you talk to them and you get their perspective, their view of the United States. And it's interesting, it's not at all, in many cases, what you would think would be the perspective. We would assume in this country, if we were isolated, if we were living in a bubble, that the world should appreciate our contributions. But it's not always the case. And a lot of times you wonder how ungrateful the world is because they don't see all the good that we do in the world. What they tell us is, yes, but you don't see the things that we see. So, think about that. When you think about the concept of American exceptionalism. I'm going to tell you what it means to me. To me, American exceptionalism is really best represented by the American spirit of volunteerism around the world. It's our nature of giving freely. I'm not talking about the government. I'm not talking about institutions, charity institutions, etc. I'm talking about individuals like yourselves that get involved in humanitarian work, volunteer work. It's kind of the vision that President Kennedy had when he created the Peace Corps back in the 1960s. But his vision was more oriented toward the government organizing these projects, these activities. Over time, it's evolved. Now, with the facility that we have to travel relatively inexpensively overseas, the technology that we have to communicate with people around the world instantly, constantly, we now have the power to do things that President Kennedy never imagined. And what I've noticed in the past 10 or 15 years of doing volunteer work in Honduras is that there are thousands and tens of thousands of individuals such as yourselves who go down to countries like Honduras and do amazing work. That is exceptional to me. No other country comes close to the United States in terms of this type of exceptionalism. Other countries, France, Britain, contribute to peacekeeping forces around the world. They respond where there's an emergency with humanitarian assistance. They respond with their military when there are crisis situations, when there's genocide, for example, in Africa, or Latin America, or Asia. All of these are great things. And we view them as exceptional, but so do other countries. So is it in fact exceptional, or is it just something that's a good thing that everybody else does as well? But I've not noticed the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of French, Brits, Norwegians doing the kind of work that I've seen average, normal American citizens doing in Latin America, specifically in Honduras. Building schools, teaching kids, teaching families, building water filters, installing water filters, building hospitals, clinics. And you do that because it's an adventure, because it's an opportunity for you to give. And it's amazing to me the transformative effect that this has on the communities in Honduras and in Latin America and Africa. But it's even more interesting to me, it's more fascinating to me to see the transformative effect that it has on the giver. It may sound a little mushy, but trust me, giving does give more to the giver than it does to the one who's receiving. These volunteer projects, this humanitarian work, is done mostly not through government. It's mostly done through schools, universities, churches, Rotary clubs, any number of private institutions. If you go to Honduras, for example, and you're at the airport, or you're at the airport, say, in Atlanta, on a Delta, waiting for a Delta flight, or in Miami, waiting for an American flight, going to Honduras, you're going to run into at least half the people on those planes are volunteers. And they're coming from every state in the United States. They're coming from Methodist churches, Baptist churches, Catholic churches. They're coming from universities, from some high schools. You go down for a week, you go down for 2 weeks, you do some great work, you meet some people, you build relationships, personal relationships, and you come back and you assume your normal life again. And you may not think that you're having much of an effect, but you're having more of an effect than you could ever imagine. It's not the money that our government provides overseas that's really changing the world. Trust me, it's not. And I say this because you have countries like Honduras where their governments don't work very well. There's corruption, there's poor governance, so the money that you send kind of gets lost. Some of it gets stolen, some of it gets mismanaged. It just disappears. It never reaches mostly the people who really need it. But when you do volunteer work, and you contribute not your money, not just your money, you contribute what we call human capital, which is what is not financial capital. It's your energy, it's your talent, your expertise. All of you have incredible talents, expertise. Some of you may not even know that you have it, but you have it. You just have to find it and put it to use. Your enthusiasm, all these things, if you contribute that one-on-one overseas, you will make a huge, huge difference in this world. I've seen it personally, the way it transforms small communities, communities of 10 people, 20, towns, particularly when the effort is repeated from year to year to year. At some point, when you start connecting with people overseas, and you make friends, and you start learning the language and the culture, you really start to bond. And you start to not want to stop. You don't want to, you want to continue to do that same effort over and over and over. It becomes infectious. This is the way you transform communities, and you transform the world and yourselves. I encourage you, while you're here at Hargrave, to reflect, particularly on this week, internationally. Reflect about those things that you have, those talents, that human capital that you have, that you can share, not only with the world, but your communities here. I mean, obviously, it's just as important to transform your communities in this country. But on a week like this, where you're called to reflect about the world around you, think about how the world looks at you, how it looks at your country. Think about those things that are truly exceptional. Is it the things that we normally like to think about as being exceptional? American love of freedom, our Constitution. All these are great things, and they may be exceptional. But other countries have similar things as well, and they look at those things as exceptional. But think about the thing that truly makes this country exceptional. It is its spirit of giving, its spirit of volunteerism. Nobody else matches that. And I call on you to be a part of that and to bring forth those things that you have within you that are eventually going to come out naturally, and find a way to share those with the rest of the world. I think I have a little bit of time left, so I would like to open it up for any questions that you might have. I'd be more than glad to answer. Raise your hand. No. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
What is your next trip to Honduras?
Excuse me?
What is your next trip to Honduras?
My next trip to Honduras will be next year. I have two daughters that are getting ready to go to college, and so I'm trying to work harder to raise a lot of money, put them through college. So my volunteer work is going to take a bit of a pause. But we'll be going back next year to a conference that we organize every year in the town of Cupan. Cupan is a small town in northwestern Honduras. And it's known for its ruins, its Mayan ruins, ancient ruins. Beautiful town. And one of the things we do with this conference that we do every year is we pull together all these volunteer groups that I just mentioned to you. Medical brigade groups, Rotary Club groups that do wonderful work all over Honduras. And what we try to do is network. We try to bring them together in one place for 3 days and get them to talk to each other. Because a lot of these groups are working in isolation. Some are working in La Mosquitia, the jungle, others are working in the south, in kind of very drought-ridden areas, some in the north, where it's very tropical. But they're not really talking to each other. In some cases, we have these groups working in one town next to, it's really close to the other town, and they can be cooperating. And this is another concept I want to leave you with. When you're here, and when you get out of here, think about always networking. Whether it's for business, for your career, but just anything you do, communicate with people. And certainly if you're doing volunteer work, talk to people so that you're not working in isolation. You do a lot more working together, really, than you could in isolation. So anyways, this conference we just bring them together, and we're going to try to continue doing that for the next few years. Anybody else? I want to thank you. Yes?
If you could pick one project that you found most rewarding, what is it?
One project in our volunteer work, I would say water. There's nothing more important than having clean water in a third world country, poor country. You can build all the hospitals you want, all the clinics, but a lot of times you don't have enough money to staff them to provide medications. If you go to clinics and hospitals all over Honduras, they're poorly stocked with medicine. They just don't have any medicine. So if you really want to make a difference in a poor country, start with water. Water filters, because that's the number one killer of children, is drinking contaminated water. So I would say building water, installing water filters in countries. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the administration for inviting me.